Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name's Clint Button and I'm a granite sculptor. Okay, we're going to start working on this waste mold. This is going to have some information that carries over into all the other casting videos. You can see I've cheated, gone the easy route, put some just some painter's tape around this to mask the plywood for the most part. It'll make the the mother plaster mold come off easier. It won't adhere really hard to the plywood, but this will help it release and the tape will stick to it and can just pull it off. So that should be pretty self-explanatory to use it as a release agent. Now, what I'm going to do, tell you the process, I'm going to mix up a batch of plaster, and for this I want a product that's a low strength, relatively low strength. I've got Hydrocal, but it's many times stronger than regular plaster. Makes great models, but boy, it's a lot of work to carve it off, and I got to get done. This is about doing things and finishing a result, not claiming it's important because it took 10 times longer than it needed to. So I'm going to use, I don't have any regular molding plaster. This is plaster of Paris, which is equivalent. It's got a 20 to 30 minute open time. And so you've got to be aware of that. If you buy the wrong plaster and it's only got like a 10-minute open time, that bucket's going to lock up before you ever get your product all installed on your job, and you're going to throw away a lot of plaster. Now here's a quick table of some products that I will use. As a release agent that I will paint on this clay before I work, I was trained by Angelo to just use Fell's Naphtha laundry soap. Now, you can use liquid dish detergent, you can use Vaseline, you can use a whole number of other products. This is what I was taught to use, so this is what I use. I keep a container with different materials in it, a little organized in my shop. This is a tuna fish or a cat food can, I forget which. I'll scrape some off and I'll mix it up with this little utility brush that I marked naphtha so I don't waste it on a bandsaw or a project wiping drill swarfs off. An easy way to have a little bit of water is just use a spray bottle. You can also use a dish detergent bottle. I keep some old empty ones for that exact purpose. You just put some water in it, you can run it out a drip or two at a time and get it just the consistency you want. You want this to be paintable. You don't want it to be, I don't like it to be water, I like it to be a actual wet, slippery glue. We'll put that on we'll paint that on here, and that'll dry and as I put the plaster on. Now there's different ways to mix your plaster. The old way that a lot of people do, oh, get you a basketball and cut it in half. And the point with that is that it gives you a bowl that's flexible, that when the plaster dries, you can flex it, break the plaster loose and get it out. Well, that kind of works. And if you don't have anything else, it's pretty good, but I don't like them because they're not stable. You got to have another bowl to put them in so they don't tip over, you know, and so I kind of moved on. I used some plastic tubs for years. I always had a pair. I could mix my plaster out, have a wet tub and a dry tub, have the next batch of plaster ready to go, because one of these is never enough for the size of work that I do. And I found that I can work this amount approximately, you know, a couple of gallons of plaster, and I can work it effectively and not have a failure. So I can have a wet, have a dry. As soon as I get this wet done, I can rinse it out. I can go back into this to get rid of all the activated plaster remnant, and then I can mix in here so I can do several batches back to back. It works really well. Now, mixing plaster means you have to measure it. Easy way to do it, figure out your measurement, then make you a dedicated measure like this gallon vinegar jug. Mark the amounts on there where it needs to be, and then you fill it. You could even scoop your plaster directly out of the bag if you've got room with this, or scoop into this. Then, in order to add it, you can stand this up, and spin the cap off as you're holding it over there, and your plaster can go in, even if you got to use your finger to moderate it. Your plaster can go in and saturate into a mound like you want it to be. You'll be at the right ratio and you're golden. It works really, really well. This works really fast, real consistent, and it's super cheap. You don't have to spend a lot of money on fancy stuff. Now, these plaster buckets, they're Rubbermaid, I believe. Had them for years. Started to get bad. I wanted a better product. So I grew up farming. You had these buckets that a horse or an animal can't break. They're just a flat back 8-quart bucket, and they're rubber. And this is a really good size. It makes the same batch that I'm used to working. You can see how I've used these for multiple casts now, and you can see how they don't retain any of the plaster that the basketball does. I'm sure they're probably made in China now. I don't know where they're made, but you get them at your farm store, order them offline. I think I ordered these online just because I thought that was an ideal size, and they're fantastic. So I use these, still use my dry, but I like having the 2 buckets. I can have one that's clean and ready to go, and one that's being washed and to back it up, and I can swap between the 2. We've looked at the tank, squirt bottle. I keep 2 or 3 buckets of water, and in order to charge them, I got one of these ridiculously huge, it's a 72-ounce ladle, and you can use something for anything for a dipper. This is a nice size. You can get a lot of water or a little bit of water. I clean these off. These have been on the shelf and get ready to start. I'm going to set up and do all these models. And but I found after years of working, I worked as a chef for many years before I ever did stone. And by always keeping one hand dry, your good hand, like if you're right-handed, I always kept my knife hand dry, and I kept my other hand, my left hand that did all the work, it could be wet. And then when something happens, you've always got a dry hand, because one of the worst things you could do is reach into a dry bag of plaster with a wet hand and activate a bunch of the plaster, and it's just no good. Now, plaster can be kept for a long period of time if you're careful, whether it's hydrocal, whether it's plaster of Paris, whether it's dental stone. I keep it in a barrel with a lid, all wrapped up tight in plastic, multiple plastic bags. The only thing I can tell you is about keeping it dry and knowing whether it's going to work or not is generally if you feel it and there's any grit in it, it should feel almost cool to the touch and almost have a sticky quality because it's so dry. If you can feel any small amount of grit, like there's just a couple grains of sand in there, it's junk. Throw it out. Don't use it because it won't set right. It won't make a good result. And if you're doing a one-shot job like a waste mold, or you're trying to produce a mother, the mother will fail and the job will fail. So anyways, this is the first installment of a waste mold, but I'll probably keep it as just a regular materials video. As I said, I really like these 8-quart buckets, 2-gallon buckets. Gallon measure for the plaster. These are an homage to the old guys that taught me, but I don't really use them. And plenty of naphtha soap. So spatula to clean things out. So anyway, so we'll get going, and we'll talk specifically about the waste mold process here in the next video. So once again, my name is Clint Button here at Carolina Sculpture Studio. Thanks for stopping by.